And please welcome our host, Christopher Rausch. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? It is Christopher Rausch, and you are at your place to have a raw and unscripted conversation with me tonight and my special guest. So thank you guys all for being here, whether you're live on the video broadcast or you're listening to us on the audio podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've been going now for 259 shows, and we have brought you some amazing guests. So we highly encourage you to go check out the audio podcast. We're on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get an audio podcast. Go there, type in raw and unscripted, or you can type in Christopher Rausch, RAUSCH, and you'll find my other podcast called The Unfiltered Experience as well. We appreciate you joining us tonight on the podcast or on the live video cast. And of course, if you're with us live, please feel free to ask us questions, whether it's live or on the replay. We'll make sure that my guest or myself get back to you, get to the answers, because this is a conversation with you and I. This is all of us sitting in a bar or coffee shop, having a great conversation, talking about what we can do to uplift our life, what we can do to go out there and get out of our comfort zone, what we can do to leave a legacy that we're proud of. And I was thinking today, I was driving home, I was thinking about this show, and I was thinking about my legacy. And of course, you got anybody who's been following the show for any length of time. We've been doing the show for 5 years. You guys have heard a lot of my stories, and you guys know that I'm big on legacy. And I talk about my eulogy, right? My eulogy, and the crux of my eulogy says, Christopher Rausch will have fought for what's right and what's fair. He will have risked which that mattered, and he will have left the earth a better place for who he was and what he did. And then I was driving home today, and I was thinking about my legacy, and I know there's so much more I'm going to do, and there's so much more I'm going to conquer and crush in my life. But I stopped and thought about it. I'm like, is that really my legacy? And I thought about my son, and I thought about my life, and I thought about my mom and my sister, and I thought about a bunch of people in my life. And sometimes we get unfulfilled with our life. We think that we think that the legacy is going to come after we're gone. And I realized my legacy has already happened. It's not going to happen when I'm gone. It's already happened because I've broken the generational cycle of abuse in my family. I've broken the generational cycle of self-abuse in my family. I've broken the generational cycle of blame and complacency and all this stuff, because I realized my mom, and it kind of broke my heart today to think about it. And I never thought about it this way, but I thought about my mom today, and I thought, God, she really lived a hard life. She really lived a tough life. She had to fight and fight and fight and fight. And I know I'm 55 years old. I'm tired of fighting. I'm looking for more peace in my life. I'm just letting stuff go, material things, people things, whatever things. I'm letting ideas go. I'm just getting into the full stream of consciousness and what I can do and what I can accomplish, but also just being in the moment, right? Someday is not going to be the place where we're going to have a legacy. The legacy is where we're building it today. And I realized that because my son is now 7 years old, never laid a hand on him, only use words, give them tons of love. I never had a dad. So my legacy is the fact that I broke that generational curse. My sister, miserable life. She followed my mom's footsteps. She blamed everybody. She was angry. She was hateful. She was hurtful. And I wished her well, right? So when you think about this, I've created my legacy already, and I've accomplished that. So everything else is gravy. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is how you can create your legacy by doing something that I've been doing for the last 3 years. It's called writing your book. This book, in case you haven't seen it before, is called It's Just You and Me, Kid. It's a true story about my life. It's a true story. Obviously, I'm not Dave Grohl. So, hey, look at that. Twinsies. Anybody ever see Dave Grohl? Little. Wait a minute. We'll put the glasses on. Let's see if that does it. Let's see. I've never done this before. Is there a similarity between me and Dave Grohl? Is there? I can go put a plaid shirt on. So yes. So I just wanted to share that with you. But writing my legacy, even though it's not been published yet, and if you guys want to check it out, go to itsjustyoundmekid.com. Itsjustyoundmekid.com. You guys can get a preview of what it's going to be about. You guys can get on a special mailing list to get my book. If you haven't done that yet, please do so. It's going to be coming out a little bit later this year. I'm in the process right now of finding time to finish editing it. And we're going to be talking about that tonight, because we want you out there, ladies and gentlemen, you guys have a story to tell, whether it's your own story or whether it's a story. Maybe you have some fantasies in your mind. Maybe you've had some make-believe things in your mind and you want to tell a story. To put that in legacy form and to write that down is pretty amazing. And my guest tonight is going to help you guys do that. Look at what we got in the house. All right. We got Jacqueline in the house. What's up? My Irish kick-ass sister. She says, hi, Christopher. Glad to be here. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. We got Durlov Smith in the house. Words are fully charged with positive ideas and inspiration. Keep it up, big bro. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, man. We're going to have an awesome conversation tonight. We got Jody in the house. Says, hello, Christopher. And Jody says, yes. And then we got Jacqueline Rose saying, my legacy will be that I gave when I had no more to give. I love that, Jacqueline. We all have the opportunity right now to give more. The world needs us. I mean, there's so many people that are struggling and having a tough time right now. I just want to do the side note. Please take a moment every single day to try to make someone else's day just a little bit better. That's just my little side note for that's the fee. We'll call that the fee for watching tonight's episode. The fee is that you go out there every single day and you make somebody smile. You make somebody feel a little bit more special and important, especially somebody who looks like they're sad. I sit there and I say hi to people. I talk to people, and I may be the one person that actually stopped and listened and cared about that person that day. We all have an opportunity to do that, and it doesn't cost you a fucking cent. Jody says, so great to catch you. Thank you, my dear. She goes, yes, yes, I agree every day, 100%. And Jody's going to be on here on the show here pretty soon. So without anything ado, I met this beautiful woman, I believe on Clubhouse. If you guys remember Clubhouse back in the good old days when it was fun. And she is a breath of fun, excitement, and knowledge. Please welcome to the Raw and Unscripted show, Nuala Naughton. Hi, Nuala. What's going on? How are you tonight from England? Bloody England. You're at 3 o'clock in the morning there. So thank you, darling, for showing up. How are you?
I'm fine, gorgeous. Excited to be here. And I'm lucky enough to have had a sneaky peek at your story of your life. So it's a hell of a read.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate you for that as well. And one of these days we're going to get it out. But my first question for you tonight, my dear, is what do you want to get across to most people tonight? You heard my opening, you kind of heard how I set up the conversation. What do you want people to walk away most thinking and knowing from this conversation? What do you want them to be inspired to be doing?
Well, my mission is to get people to write their life story or their memoir. I think we've lost over the past couple of decades, even generations, we've lost that ancient art of storytelling through, verbal down through the generations and in songs. And I think that the latest trend in recent years of journaling, apart from the tremendous proven therapeutic aspect of it, it's just a short leap from that to actually writing your story. And who knows whether it's for your own family, treasured family heirloom, or it could end up being a blockbuster movie. Who knows?
That's going to be my story. It's going to be a blockbuster movie, and Dave Grohl's going to play me. Well, wait a minute. We're the same age. That's not going to work. So what started this all for you? What was it as a kid? You were fascinated with books. Were you a book reader? What started all this passion for you?
Well, I loved all the stories that my mum used to tell us when we were growing up. But also, if you've got a minute, I realized when my father came back into our lives later on when I was like in my late 20s, and he had written a book. It's a whodunit, and I should publish it actually. But he asked me to type up his manuscript, and he was always a very patriarchal guy. We didn't see him if we weren't feeling well or anything like that. We had to all be washed and cleaned and ready for bed. And he didn't sort of confide in us or any of that. So I never really got to know him. And it wasn't until I was typing up his manuscript. It's a fabulous story. It's set in a small village in Ireland in the kind of 20s and 30s. And as I started typing up, I started to realize all these characters are real people in the village that he grew up. I'm absolutely certain of that. And I started to recognize one of the characters as, I think this is my father as a young boy. And it was quite an emotional moment because I realized I never knew my father until my late 20s when I was typing up this manuscript, and I thought that's actually quite sad, but I was also gratified for it because I finally got to know him, and that's what started my passion with helping people to write their life story. And the great thing about it is you don't have to be grammatically correct. There's editors all over the place, but that doesn't matter. If you can tell your story to a friend, you can speak it into a microphone and have it transcribed by one of these whizzy transcription apps that describe it. They go from speech to text. So there's really no excuse.
No excuse. Dun, 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 dun. No excuses. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want the No Excuses bands, go to my website. You guys can always check them out. So true. Was your father alive when you read the story, when you were typing that up?
Yes, he was, but he was on his way out, to be honest. So that to me is a treasured heirloom. Yeah.
Yeah. No, why haven't you published that? I mean, of all the things that you published in your life, why not publish your father's book and leave that legacy for him? Do the thing that he didn't get a chance to do.
Absolutely. I should have done it years ago, and I'm definitely, it's one of my things to do in the next sort of 18 months or so is to get that published.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard that. You've heard that. I was just going to ask you, I was going to say, I'm going to be your coach for a second. So I'm going to say, when is that? And you said 18 months.
Yep.
So trust me on this. I will, after the show, I will go into my calendar and I'll figure out 18 months and I'll put it on my calendar and I'm going to hit you up in 18 months. I've done this so many times. I've done it to people. I know you'll do it, but so many times I mess it. They're like, Chris, you really said you were going to do that. Like, I'm going to do that in 6 months. I'm going to do that in 2 years. I'm going to do that in a year. And I put it on my calendar and I sit there and I go back to them like, how are you doing on that? And so many people don't do that, but I know you're going to do that because that's important. That's important. That would be such an amazing story to be able to, for you and your dad almost to commingle in that journey together and be able to share that because he never got a chance to do that. And it sucks. It sucks when we get to learn about people. We never get to learn the true meaning of people. And I think that's one of the gifts of this generation, especially this younger generation. I feel like we're all more interconnected. As much as the world wants to make us feel like we're separated, I think, when I look at and I talk to people from back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 20s and so on and so forth, all the different generations I've spoken to, it was more, like you said, especially overseas, in England and all those places, it was more etiquette and proper, to have, the look and have, everything proper and everything. And now it seems like people have broken down those stereotypes and those walls and we get to know each other. My son asked me questions. He's like, Dad, how was your childhood? I said, my childhood really sucked. There was a lot of abuse and things of that nature, but there was good times in there. And so I want him to know everything about me. I said, you can ask me anything. We have this open, honest relationship. I tell him when I'm having a bad day. I want him to feel like he can talk to people and communicate with people. And one of the things that we've done to help him do that is on the subject of reading. We've read to him ever since he was born, like from a baby till now. He's 7 years old. And we just found out from his teacher, he's in first grade. He has a second grade reading level. And so it's pretty interesting to see just by reading to him, his intelligence level. What has that been for you in your life and the books you've read? What do you think are maybe like the top 3 books that you've read in your life that have changed your perspective about yourself and perhaps the world around you?
Oh, well, we were definitely brought up in a kind of socialist environment. We were very politically active as a family. Trade union wise, I've been a trade unionist for all my life. And so the first book that I buy all my kids and grandkids, I've done it for 40 odd years, is The Hobbit, because it's just exciting and it's a fantasy. The Hobbit, the whole bit. Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit.
Oh, okay, yeah, oh yeah.
But the other one that I buy for people is The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist. It was written during the Depression, and it really changes your whole mindset. It's a fabulous book, socialist book, so it's really good.
When after the show, because I want to make sure people get the right books. If you could type that into the comments, that would be great. That way people can go check that out.
I will. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. What are some other books that what's the one book that I was thinking about this earlier today? What's the one book that you've read that you wish you wrote?
I don't know. I think. Yeah,
I'm supposed to say I haven't written it yet.
Well, I have written it, actually. One of my favorite books is the one I've written about a rock venue in Glasgow. It's quite a cool book. But yeah, I'm not really, I just love to hear people's stories. Telling other people's stories is my big thing. And every story I hear is worthy of being a book that I wish I could write, but I won't do it the way they will. So my whole mission is to encourage other people to write their own story. I suppose I should take a leaf out of my own book and start writing my memoir.
That's one of my questions. So now that you just opened that door, when are you going to write your memoir, or have you?
Oh, I haven't.
You live quite an exciting life, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and it's been a very varied life. From My first actual profession was as a dancer, and that got me all around the world, and that's how I got to see the world and learn new cultures and new cuisines and all of that. So yes, I'm going to take a leaf out of my own book and just jump in. I always say, you don't have to start at the beginning. Start in the middle, and just start with a key moment in your life, and then expand it out from there. And so that's where I'm starting. I started from my first job as a dancer, my first foray into the world. So it won't end up being my first chapter, but it's where I'm starting. So that's my whole thing. You don't have to start. To me, it's like if you get one key point in your life and just say what happened, just write a paragraph. And then what happened just before that, what led up to it, what happened after that. And if you do that with lots of key, like, these little pearls of wisdom that you've learned, then eventually, by the time you've finished, they'll all join together into a beautiful pearl necklace. That's the way I analogize it.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. So when people come to work with you, Nuala, what should they expect? What are some of the areas that you help them with the most?
Yeah, just like this, just having a conversation like this, and not having to worry about grammar or anything. Just start somewhere. It is my thing. And someone I worked with recently, he just wanted to write his book for his kids, because there was lots of crazy things going on in his life that they probably never known about. And the one thing that his story is fantastic. I help people to lift their words off the page. I help people to get, instead of constant narrative, to get dialogue in there. That brightens up a story. And he asked me to edit it for him. We worked on it for a long time, and then he asked me to edit it, and I said, I can't edit it because his grammar was atrocious. He wrote sentences that were like 2,000 words long and
whoa,
and everything. And I said, if I clean that up, it'll strip it of your voice. So the one thing I like to get people is just speak in your own voice, write in your own voice, and that's a key.
So let me ask you: could you hear my voice when you were reading my book?
Absolutely, I could. You were in my head the whole time. I felt as if I was almost like you reading your book. I could feel the emotions, and it's not easy to get the emotions down. I think that's why journaling helps. You can go back to a journal and remember an event that you remember differently years later, but when you journalized it, you also put your emotions down, put your feelings down at the time, and that's key, is how you were feeling at the time. And I got that all the way through your book. It was fabulous.
Thank you. It's that was one of my biggest challenges when I was thinking about the book. Sitting down, it's one thing for me to tell everybody that I was a homeless 7th grade dropout and lived in the backseat of a station wagon with 18 cats and 4 dogs and had a mother with various psychological disorders and tried to kill myself twice and got carjacked and all these different wonderful things that happened in my life. But to your point, Nuala, I went back through my journals. I've been journaling since 1997, I think it is. Wow. Somewhere around there. And so I went back through in the preparation of this book. I had never looked at those journals at all. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, to Nuala's point, this is a digital voice recorder. This is how I used to journal. I would sit there and say, today is January, da, 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 da. And I would sit there, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd go home and I'd plug this into my computer, because there was actually a little USB thing right here somewhere. Used to be. Oh, there it is. So a little USB thing. It pops out. I plug it in my computer. I used to use Dragon Naturally Speaking, and it would recite it, and I would save it as a Word document. And so in the preparation of this book, I went back and started reading some of those journals about my mom and all the stuff. And the book, it's so funny. If I would have put all the stuff of the journals in that book would have been like, it would have been this big. But the thing in writing the book for me, was putting people in those places and having to go get deep and dark and very specific and intentional. Like talking about the time I had to call the police on my mother's husband, lack of a better term, mother's husband, because he was beating her and they were fighting and they were about to kill each other. I had to go into her study and call the police, hide under the desk. And I saw the red and blue lights coming in. I was like, how do I describe that to somebody? And as I was thinking back on it and trying to put people into that place, I was like, how did I survive all that? Like as a 6-year-old little boy, thinking of my son, 7 years old, I'm like, God, younger than him, I had to deal with so much stuff. And to put people in that place, was painful, but also was very therapeutic. And that's one thing I want to get across to all you guys out there thinking about writing your life story. There's an opportunity. There's a big healing opportunity in doing that, because for me, and I want to get your perspective on this, is I wanted to also give justice to my mom. I didn't want it to just be a smear piece about her. I wanted people to get in her mind. And I hope you got that as well. Did you get that when you were reading the book, that you got from that? I tried to put it in her perspective as well.
Yeah, I got her personality came across really loud and clear. And yeah, you could almost see things from her perspective because of the way you wrote it. So
Yeah.
You were very gentle with her.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. But what guidelines or what suggestions do you have for people to do that brainstorm? You talked about, just starting wherever you're at, which I think is a great idea. That's kind of what I did. I took things in terms of geographical locations that we lived in. So that was the first way I started. That's the way I kind of laid out the book. Do you have any other suggestions for brainstorming, like, running drafts or like chapter outlines or some of those other techniques?
Absolutely. I think writing the proposal, writing a good proposal, actually helps you to map out the book yourself, even before you started writing it. But another thing is to go through old photographs.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Just write a paragraph down about everyone that's in that photograph, or ask people about the people you don't know that are in the photograph, and start padding it out like that. Just going through old photographs is extremely powerful in terms of opening up your mind. There's another trick that I have that I stole from, I think, probably Aristotle.
But you stole from Aristotle?
Yeah.
Did you get busted?
It was used by Edison and Freud and Dali. They all used this technique of you get yourself in a quiet place, you put a tray or a tile, something down on the floor beside you, and you have a set of keys or pebbles or something in your hand, and you just kind of drift away in a kind of meditative way. And all of a sudden, as you get into that kind of dreamlike creative state, I think it's the theta region, I'm not sure, your hand will just turn and flop, and the keys or the stones will dash on the tray, and it'll bring you back into the room. And all of these people use it. Also in the shower is a good place. All the people use that technique to open up the creative sides of the brain, and have those little syntax moving. And it really works a treat. And just write down whatever comes into your mind after that, even if it's a shopping list. And that travels with you throughout the day. And maybe just before you go to bed, some thought will come into your head, and don't forget to write it down, because we always think we're going to remember it the next morning, and we don't.
Oh, no, I'm famous for that. That's why I love using my Apple Watch to be able to leave notes for myself. But I make a lot of notes, but do I take action on them? That's the ADHD talking. What have been some of the more fun projects you've worked on? Talk to us about an exciting project that you got to work on, and the dynamics of what it is that you helped that person go through and what they ultimately were able to produce.
I think probably my favorite one was a book. He called it The Farm Boy. He was brought up on a farm, but he went through all kinds of experiences from very young. His father was a bit of an inventor, so he's a bit of an engineer. And he went through a life. He became he ran his own business, like £1 million business, and he he was scammed out of a whole lot of his money,
Oh, wow.
by some, yeah. And he ended up, having to go to Rwanda actually, and find the guy, and then the guy set, you know, set his people on him. He said there's more than faxes that can be sent out of Africa, and it's it, it it's quite a dynamic. It would make a fantastic movie, and so that was great. But he just, of all the things that he did, he did consider himself a farm boy. But all the adventures he had in his life are amazing.
Yeah. So was it like a life story, or was it like talking about your dad's life, where it was like he made characters about himself?
Yeah, it was his life story, but it all came around to the different characters in his world. And it just like, to me, I can't help thinking of people's stories as a movie, and I can see who would play him and all that. And I think Kirk Douglas would have played him in his later years. Um, but what I learned from him, he only died a few years ago in his 90s, was the wisdom, that came out of him. It was amazing. And also the ancient wisdom that you knew he had learned from his grandmother and that kind of thing. And that's what I love about people telling their life story, because we're living a time where our kids and grandkids will be learning about our time in history. Um, and I remember when my mum, I was doing the Second World War in school, and then I come back and say things to my mum, and she would say, "Oh yeah, I remember that," because they didn't get the news from the internet. They got the news from the Pathy news when you went to the cinema.
Yeah.
And she said, "I remember how I felt when that particular event happened in the war." And I thought, Reiki, my mum lived through that. It never occurred to me what I'm learning in history. And so that's what I'd like to pass on. Textbooks can be quite clinical, and some cases can rewrite history. Whereas when you write your own story, it has a personal voice, and people go along with you in your life story or your memoir. And that's just the bottom line. Always comes down to tell your stories, and tell it right now. Journal it, because you owe it to future generations. But also they will, they'll never meet you, but they'll meet you through your book. And you'll never meet them, but they'll learn from you, and maybe learn a little bit about themselves from you writing about your experiences and your wisdom. And so it always comes back to that.
Yeah, no, I love that, Nuala. It really is about sitting there taking back, the 30,000 foot view, right? Why we're here. What's the big why? We're all here to experience lessons. I believe we're here to experience lessons that we have not learned in previous lifetimes. And I also believe that we're here to experience the moments and the joy, because as a spirit, and this is weird for me to say because I was not this person 5 or 6 years ago, but as spirit, we don't get to have the five senses. We don't get to touch, smell, all the different things that we get to do. So I think part of the process here is to be able to experience that life and breathe new life into the future generations, like you're saying, and be able to say, okay, listen, what can I learn from what have people experienced in the First World War? What can I learn from the people that went through the Great Depression? What can I learn from the people in the 60s and the 70s and the free love? What can I continue to learn about myself and leave for those future generations when they can look back? Because I think, quite honestly, and I want your thoughts on this as well, the way technology is going, AI, one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about is AI, because you talked about the voice to text. I mean, there's so many programs out there. I have Grammarly now. There's so many programs out there that can help us with those things. But what are your thoughts on being able to overcome the negative voices in our head when we sit there and think, who's going to want to hear my story? What are your thoughts on that? Well, or have you dealt with that? Have you dealt with that with your clients, and what have you done to get them over that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hear that a lot. Who wants to know about my story? And one the two sisters that I'm working with just now, and they started off. Their niece wanted them to start writing about their stories in growing up in Montana and the Rough Riders of Montana and all of that. And And that's exactly what they said. Who wants to know about our story? And we said, well, maybe even just, have you ever said, I wish I knew what my grandmother was really like, or, what it was like going through those times? And they both said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I said, well, you don't want your grandkids to be saying that about you. I wish I knew about my Auntie Barb, right? Or Janet. And anyway, so they started, and they said, oh, I don't like writing, and we're not techie and all that. And within 48 hours, they've both gone out and bought a laptop, and they're writing stories like Ballyhole, and they're, getting together with friends and saying, how do you remember this story? And no one's ever wrong, because it's how you remember it that counts. Someone else might say, oh, no, that was another time or place. However you remember it is your story. And they're having a ball now. It's almost like their new hobby is just writing down, remembering things and going, oh, yes, let's write that down. And they're working on it together. And she knows writing your biography can be a solitary thing. And a lot of people don't really feel they're up to it. But another group I'm working with, a group of sisters, they said we'd never do this on our own, but it's actually a chance to get together once a week. So yeah, and you don't have to do it on your own.
No, I don't. I think that's a definite confirmation right there, is to make sure that we're not doing it on our own, because we need those external eyes to be able to also, read it and understand it, and like be able to, ask questions about it and say, okay, whatever happened with this? That's one of the things that I was doing with the book is, people who go to itsjustyoumandmekid.com, after the book is published and people have read it, I want to offer like an online opportunity to come and ask me questions. So that's one of the gifts that people help me make it a bestseller. When they help me make a bestseller, I'm going to do an open forum where they can read the book, and then they can say, okay, whatever happened to this, whatever happened to this. And perhaps that might spawn a second part of the book. What recommendations do you have for people who get writer's block? Aside from just start somewhere, but they think in terms of, like, we've been talking a lot about life stories. Let's talk about creative writing and freestyle writing and, and fantasy writing and stuff like that. What happens? What suggestions do you have for people when they get writer's block?
Well, my big technique for that is, I don't believe that you should say, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend 2 hours writing, I'm going to shit out a story, because when you look back at it, it will be shit. You'll rewrite it again. But I do think even if it's shite, write it down, get it on a page, because once you've got something on that, it's not a blank page anymore. You've got something to fix, so you can look at it again, and whatever it is, just write it down. Write 100 words, 200 words of it, and when you go back to it tomorrow, you'll rewrite it, but at least you have something there to fix and to rewrite and to add to, rather than a blank page. So yeah, write shite.
And she says in her true Scottish accent, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I screw them up. I was sitting there as an Irish guy. I remember we talked about Glasgow, and my wife's family's from there as well. In terms, like, when I think about books and I think about some of the books I've read, for me, it's always been personal development. It's like that was the key for me. When I was a kid, I really didn't read much. I had books and stuff like that, but for me, the thing was getting that personal development, kind of thirst, learning about, okay, what can I continue to learn from other people? What recommendations do you have for people who say that they're poor readers? Like, I talk to people like, oh, I just can't read, I have these issues. Do you have any suggestions for that? When I was talking to somebody about the show tonight, they were saying, I have a hard time reading. They listen to audiobooks, which is obviously an option. What recommendations do you have for any of that?
There's nothing like turning a page. The one thing you read about a good book like yours is it's a page turner. There's nothing like having it in your hand and in real physical terms and turning the pages over. But I do understand, like with audio books, you can be out running, you can be doing other things. And in terms of AI, I'm not scared of AI. I tend to think that, I say AI can't put the soul into soul food, right? And so even if you use AI just to prompt yourself for different stories and aspects of your 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 life story, putting it into your own words is there's nothing like that, and there is literally nothing like having that book in your hands and seeing it on the shelves, and
Oh yeah.
you're seeing people pick it up and turn the pages. Um, that in itself is therapeutic. And yeah, you use all the tools you can, but don't forget this. It's your voice that people want to hear when they're reading it. And I don't think AI can put that nuance into it.
No, I will say this. I was against Chat GBT at the beginning when I mean it's expanding so fast. I was like, nope, I'm gonna use my own creative mind. I'm not gonna do that. Da da da. And then one of my friends told me, one of my very smart friends, he says, Chris, he goes, AI is going to take people's jobs. He goes, guess what? He goes, if you use AI in your job, then your job probably won't get taken. He goes, so it's going to come whether you want to or not. And that's when I started like, okay, let me just go into Chat GPT and start playing with it and start learning how to do some commands. And I have to say I'm a convert, because it does, like, I'll put in some stuff and I'll sit there and say, hey, chat, rewrite this to be more catchy, rewrite this to be more conversational. And they'll just in like 2 seconds, it'll just tweak it just really good enough. And so I found that kind of gives me an extra boost, a little bit extra confidence in a way, to say, okay, I wrote something that I think is pretty good, but then being able to use that technology to spice it up a little bit. I don't think that's cheating. Do you?
No, I don't think I don't think it's cheating. I do think that they'll see the cream rise to the top, and in songwriting as well. And so it's not cheating, but I think it will help you to write your own words again, because you'll go over all the AI generated stuff and put it into your voice anyway. So I don't have a problem with that. And it's quite helpful in terms of also when you've got a book, and if you want it published, by a traditional publisher, they don't want you to be a one-trick wonder. They want to know if they're going to be putting money behind you, that you've got other books to come. And if you run kind of almost resume of your life into AI, it can help you. This is what I do. I tease out other books from people. You think your life stories is your opus magnus, but all the different things in your life and the therapies and wisdom that comes out of that can be a book in their own right, and can be a nurturing and helpful book to others who want to relate. They might have a similar story to yours, and just being able to relate to your story is therapeutic in itself, I think. So we almost have a duty to write it. But yeah, if you go through all the things that you've experienced in your life and all your talents and things that you've learned in life, you could have another 5 books in you. It usually goes from 1 to 5 books with me when I'm speaking to people, and they go, and when I'm in sort of social platforms speaking like this and helping people to get started, I there's almost never been a time when I've been in a room and someone hasn't said, before I heard you speaking, I didn't think I had a book in me.
Yeah.
And they have all these talents and all these experiences to share. And they go, now I think I have, and I think I can do this. And that just warms my heart.
Yeah, and you just touched on something that was going to be my next question. So I think you're reading my mind. So many people, when I tell them like, you should write your book, like, oh, I don't know if I could get it published. I'm not a big enough person. So I think, in my personal opinion, like where I'm at in my life, I think everybody should know about self-publishing, but I don't think many people do. I don't think they realize how much of a big market it is. Talk to us about traditional publishing and how it's changed and how self-publishing has evolved and how that may help other people find the confidence to be able to produce their own book, like you said, and leave that legacy piece and not necessarily be worried about the chasing, being on, New York Times bestseller list and stuff like that. Talk to us about traditional publishing versus self-publishing.
Well, first of all, speaking about the New York Times bestsellers, one of the coaching programs that I do is how to write a New York Times best-selling book on a topic you know fuck all about. Um, because Napoleon Hill was great at that. He gets quoted all the time, and the Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
He he says he got all his knowledge from the people he interviewed. He wasn't a millionaire at all, but his book about millionaires and how to think like a millionaire is still selling right now. So that's a trick, and I love the idea of an established publishing house deal because, well, first of all, what a lot of people don't know is if you have a fictional book, you have to have it completely all polished and finished and edited and everything before a publisher will even look at your proposal. The magic about a non-fiction book, which includes memoirs and autobiographies, is you don't even have to have written it yet, and you still could walk out of a publisher's office with a book deal and a multi-book deal and a cash advance before you've even started writing, because all they need is a killer idea. If you can sell them on your story or whatever you want to write about in your proposal, which is why your proposal is more important, I think, than people believe, then you can have publishers clambering to get your book without even having started writing it. And if you've got procrastination, getting a deal is a good way of solving that problem. But it used to be that self-publishing, it was called vanity publishing, and it was frowned upon. But now self-publishing has come of age, and it's very well respected if you get the right publisher, and that's a minefield in its own.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's also extremely expensive because you have to do it right. You have to have a proofreader, a structural reader, a fact checker. You have to get it typeset. You have to have a designer for your cover. It costs a lot of money. It can cost between $15,000 and $25,000 to go self-publishing. And some hybrid publishers, as they're called, have very good ins to the likes of Barnes and Noble. So they're very well respected now. Now, years ago, if you'd had your book published at all, self-published it on Amazon or anything, traditional publishers didn't want to know. You kind of sullied the water for them. Now, if you can put in your proposal that you've self-published your book and you know how to get around the Amazon algorithm, and then you've almost proven that there's a market for that book. So publishers are even thinking, again, not being snobby about whether you've produced your book before on your own. You've proved that people like it. And so there's no reason why, if you're considering going along self-publishing route, why you shouldn't also put together a proposal, a killer proposal for an established publishing house, because they may just take you on and run with you. And I know one guy, an average advance that you get, and that's the other thing, you get all these services with the book deal. So they put all these services, editing services and a legal service into your book, and it doesn't cost you anything, plus they pay you in advance, which I think in the States is usually around $30,000 to $40,000, right?
But the advance is based on the book selling, and if the book doesn't sell, then you have to pay the advance back, right?
Well, you always have to pay it. It is an advance, but it's based on what they think, the number of books they think they'll sell in its first year. But yeah, then you have to pay it back through sales. But once that's done, then all the royalties you get are yours. So and it's a fabulous into speaking tours as well. You're not going to really retire on your book.
No.
But it's a fabulous calling card to getting on the speaking tours route and getting and establishing yourself as an expert and getting yourself as the go-to expert on radio and TV shows and it's really a launching platform. If you want to look at it like that, if you want to make money out of it.
It's a huge business card.
Mm.
That's what I tell people. I tell people it's a huge business card to get you to the next phase of your life. Nuala, this has been an amazing conversation. We've been going for 45 minutes. Where can people get a hold of you to continue the conversation? I know you have some free resources. Let the boys and girls know about that stuff and where they can get a hold of you and work with you. I put your LinkedIn link just for everybody who's watching and listening. I put the LinkedIn link in the show notes. So if you're listening on the audio podcast, you can go back to that and you can check out the I'm putting up here to connect with Nuala on LinkedIn. But where can people get a hold of you as well?
They can get a hold of me at chief at unicorntraining.online. Unicorn training isn't a fanciful word, by the way. I don't know if you know this, but our national animal, Scottish national animal, is the unicorn. It's a mythological creature, yeah. Chief CHIEF at unicorntraining.online. Yeah, so that's the best email you can get me on.
Awesome.
And if you do that, if you do contact me, remind me that you were on Christopher's show, and I'll send out I've got some fabulous free resources that will inspire you. It'll get you it'll get you raring to go, and it'll start you off as well. Some real great techniques.
Nuala, you are amazing. You're a blessing in my life. You're a blessing in so many people's lives. I know this conversation is going to change people's lives. I know this conversation is going to inspire people to sit there and get out of their own way. I appreciate you so much for being here and sharing your wealth of experience and your beautiful story about your father. 18 months. I'm putting it here. 18 months, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. In 18 months, I'm going to come on this show and I'm going to say, remember, and I'm going to play a clip. I might even bring you back on here. So I encourage you. I want to see your dad's book come to print. So thank you for being here. I'm going to place you backstage. Don't go anywhere because I still want to have a chat with you. And I'm going to end out the show for just a few moments.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, my dear. I will talk to you in just a moment. And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. There is another episode of the Raw and Unscripted Show. If you joined this halfway through, please go back to the beginning and watch this. Listen to this. Obviously, I encourage you. Writing this book has changed my perspective about my life. It changed my perspective about being angry and resentful and hurt about my mom's experiences with myself and the things that she put me through, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But those things that she put me through, those things are what made me the man I am today, because I chose to become this person, right? Normally in these shows, we talk a lot about motivation. We talk about perspective. Tonight, we talked a lot about book writing, but the same thing applies. Process your story in a way that you become the hero. Process your story the way you become a hero. And if you're not the hero of your story right now, rewrite your story as you're living it. Rewrite your story as you're living it, ladies and gentlemen. Think about that. You're writing your story every day with the actions that you take. You're writing your story every day with the choices that you make. You're writing your story, especially every day, with the way you talk to yourself. Right? Oh, nobody wants to hear my book. I don't know what to say. I don't know where to start. All those excuses. Fuck the excuses. Take your fingers and start doing this. Or if you missed it earlier, take a digital voice recorder. This is probably ancient technology to most of you. I still love these things. But pick up these things. Pick up your cell phone. Woohoo. And then just sit there and start dictating. And then, like Nuala said at the beginning, send it to a transcription service. So I know for me, it was easier. For me, I typed my book, but I've already written 2 other books that I haven't published yet, so don't even get on my ass about that. But here, today, I was walking through the park, and I noticed that there was birds flying, and and just start talking, just start telling stories, or sit there. And another thing that I've done for my son is I wrote down about 13 stories. Like, what stories would I want him to know if he was older and I wasn't here? Like, what stories would I want to tell him? And then I just wrote down those 14 stories. And then you just sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to write out a story. That's literally how Dave Grohl wrote this book. If you guys are Dave Grohl fans, Dave Grohl started writing his life story by doing Instagram posts during COVID. And somebody said, wow, all those Instagram posts should make a book. And so he made a book out of that. So you too can do that as well. Whether it's a nonfiction book or a fiction book, you have a story within yourself to tell. Think about that. Think of, if you don't want to do your life story, think about something creative you can do. Think about writing a children's book from your perspective and things you've learned in your life, and try to give it characters and meaning, and try to come up with the way that the ending comes out making you look like the hero. And so that you can write your story ahead of time and live that as though it already happened. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the Raw and Unscripted Show. We are here every single Tuesday night live in person on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere as well. So we encourage you to check it out, check us out live. But of course, always get the podcast, Apple, iTunes, whatever you want to do it, take and go get those podcasts, go get those shows. There are a lot of great episodes in there that can change your life. Free. So many people are talking about, I can't afford coaching. I can't afford this. I told somebody this the other day. They said, Chris, I'd love to coach with you, but I just can't. I can't afford it. And I said, I said, probably everything that I would coach you on, I have said many times in my podcast. Do you know how many people actually will go listen to the podcast and try to coach themselves through that? They won't. But if you're interested in getting your shit together and being unstoppable, I have a group coaching program that is amazing. It's really affordable and it holds you accountable. It's a private Facebook group. You get a call with me, 2 calls a month on the Zoom call with me. It's pretty incredible. If you're interested in it, DM me wherever you're seeing this, get a hold of me. I'll give you a complimentary coaching session just for listening to the show. There you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, no excuses, and come back here in 18 months because Nuala is going to have her book done, and that's going to be pretty amazing. So go out there, write your story, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be back here next week, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I love you guys. Stay kick-ass unstoppable, and don't give yourself any excuses.